Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Demon Slayer. Signs from the Wind. Chapter 5. Junior High and High School. Tales of Kimetsu Academy. Midnight Parade. Let's skip the annoying speeches. Cheers to Miss Kanae. Tenjin Yuzui cried. Glasses clinked together across the table. It was only Thursday, but the popular pub, about a 10-minute walk from Kimetsu Academy, was jammed with drunken customers. Thank you, Kanae stood. As many of you know, Kimetsu Academy is my own alma mater, so it's exciting to start work here as a biology teacher. I'm still new at this, so I would very much appreciate your guidance. She bowed. Sighs of admiration rippled through the group. Kanae's younger sisters, still students, were all popular with the boys, but in her own day she had been a legend. Adored by girls, boys, and everyone in between, she'd shone like a star. Her male students were sure to have trouble concentrating on their studies. Yuzui glanced around the table as he sipped his beer. It was surprised that the male teachers were captivated by Kanae's every movement, but the women seemed equally entranced. The other day, the morning assembly at which she'd been introduced had erupted in chaos. A certain member of the disciplinary committee had gotten a little too excited about welcoming her, and everyone cringed at the whimpering noises he made. One of the gym teachers had brought a fist down on his head, and two of his friends had dragged the unconscious committee member off stage. And now this gang. History teacher Kyojuro Rengoku had polished off a few rounds and was shoveling sweet potato rice into his mouth with noisy relish. Math teacher Sanami Shinazugawa was drinking beer like it was water and lecturing his younger brother over the phone about his poor grades. Yuzui sympathized with the boy on the other end of the line, no doubt trembling on his knees. Jiyomi Himejima, homeroom teacher to the first-year Takenoko class, gazed at Kanae like a proud parent. He'd been teaching at Kimetsu since her student days and was clearly still protective. Gym teacher and disciplinary committee advisor Jiyu Tomioka grabbed another handful of appetizers as he tilted his sake cup back. He was silent, but this didn't necessarily mean he was in a bad mood. It was just that he couldn't talk and eat at the same time. Yuzui rolled his eyes. None of them were exactly saints, but he could see why they'd been assigned to Kanae's table. With all of them distracted in their own ways, though, it was left to Yuzui to keep the conversation going. Fortunately, Kanae was an ideal listener. No matter what he said, she reacted as if she were dying to hear more. But when Yuzui brought up the ghost stories circulating among the students, the smile fell from her face. There's a haunted pot in the biology lab? She cupped her chin in one hand. And an old man who crawls down the hallway. Don't tell me you're scared of ghost stories. Yuzui teased. Kanae smiled back. If anything, I rather enjoy them. Her expression grew serious again. But if they're upsetting the students, it's my job as a teacher to deal with that. Exactly right, Ms. Kanae. I couldn't agree more. Rengoku lifted his face from the sweet potato rice. An enthusiastic teacher, he was beloved by the student body and vocal about loving them right back. If students are having problems, Kyojuro Rengoku can't sit back and let it happen. Sure you can, Yuzui told him. Pipe down and eat your sweet potatoes, buddy. But Rengoku was on a roll. We should go immediately tomorrow night at the latest and patrol the haunted areas. Who's with me? Yuzui? Don't look at me. I'm not going anywhere. It's our duty to keep the peace at the academy. Yuzui slumped forward wearily. When he got an idea in his head, Rengoku could be a real pain. While Yuzui wrestled with the question of how to get his colleague to give up on the notion, Kanae raised her hand. If you don't mind, I'd love to tag along with you too, she said. Hey. Yuzui stared at her. I didn't say I was going. Please. I know I can be helpful. I said I'm not going. Together we'll protect our students. Rengoku agreed. Right. Yuzui? Yuzui felt a headache coming on. His words were falling on deaf ears. Rengoku was always off in his own little world, but now it seemed like Kaneo was joining him. At any rate, with two pairs of hopeful eyes staring at him, he felt an itch deep under his skin. It wouldn't hurt to do a quick walk around, then talk them into going home. There was nothing to see, after all. After an hour or so wandering the empty school halls, Rengoku and Kaneo were sure to give up. Fine, he sighed. We'll meet in front of the school gates at 11:30 tomorrow night. Rengoku and Kaneo both beamed. Yeah. Thank you. After replying with a perfunctory yeah, Yuzui turned his gaze on Himejima, seated across from him. He wasn't expecting much of an outing, but it couldn't hurt to bring someone sensible along for the ride. You're coming too, right, Himejima? On the night watch? Beneath his muscular exterior, Himejima was surprisingly soft-hearted. He looked up from his cup of hot sake, a tear trickling down his face. I wish I could join you, but I'm out of town tomorrow, and I don't know what time I'll be back. Gotta say no this time. Sorry. Bad timing, huh? How about you, Shinazugawa? Yuzui shifted his gaze to Himejima's right. Having just finished his call, Shinazugawa tucked away his phone. He scrutinized the group through his unruly hair. Huh? Even at school, Shinazugawa refused to wear a tie and kept his collar wide open. The younger students burst into tears at his mere approach, and even older kids flinched at his voice and his intense stare. But he was kind to those who needed kindness, and generally only lost his temper when he had to deal with the ape Tomioka or when someone insulted his beloved mathematics. Still, he wouldn't button his shirt for anyone or anything, including weddings and funerals. I know you were on the phone, but you heard us, didn't you? Yuzui said. We're patrolling the school tomorrow night. Nah, can't do it. What is it? A girl? I'm not a horn dog like you, Shinazugawa snorted in annoyance. Friday nights, Mom has overtime. She'll be working late. He'd be going to her workplace to pick her up, or else he'd be at home babysitting his younger siblings. Shinazugawa's father had died when he was young, and his mother had sacrificed a lot to raise 7 children on her own. Now that Shinazugawa was an adult himself, his heart and mind were focused on supporting her. You homebody, Yuzui teased. Shut up, Shinazugawa turned away with a sneer, but everyone at the table looked at him warmly. That leaves Tomioka. Yuzui turned to his own right. What do you say? Up to that point, Tomioka hadn't spoken a word. He swallowed his appetizer. Oh. If you don't have plans, you're coming with me, Yuzui said. With a gut full of sake, Tomioka mumbled even less coherently than usual. Yuzui gave up on the conversation. A server brought plates piled with chicken wings, fried octopus, and salmon stewed with daikon. At the appearance of his favorite dish, Tomioka's eyes glittered soberly. Come on. Let's drink, Yuzui said, pouring sake into his colleague's cup. Tomioka nodded and went back to drinking in silence. Kane's welcome party continued until well past midnight. The next morning, several of the teachers at Kimetsu Academy wobbled unsteadily at their podiums. And then, at last, night fell. So cold. Feels like fall's come early. Yuzui hunched over as the night wind blew over him. As far as he could tell, he was the first to arrive. The cold bit at him, but the previous night's drinks still warmed his system. He was tired. Chomping on some gum to wake himself up, he fiddled with his phone. Hey, buddy. Tomioka's voice echoed down the deserted street. Sorry I'm late. Yuzui turned to the figure racing toward him. What took you so? At the sight of the approaching teacher's dazzling smile, the bubble he was blowing popped. Tomioka skidded to a stop in front of Yuzui and let out a sigh of relief. The others haven't made it yet, Ah, great. It's cold for June, and I hate to make Kanae wait out here. Yuzui stared in shock. Sorry, are you cold? Tomioka asked. If you want, I can lend you my sweater. Yuzui shook himself. Who are you? Tomioka blinked. Gu Tomioka? From school? Don't give me that. The Tomioka I know is no ball of sunshine. He's a loner, cranky as hell, barely says a word, no clue what he's thinking, you get the idea. Wow. Tomioka winced. Is that the way you see me, buddy? You've never once called me buddy. Yuzui shivered. Goosebumps rose on his arms. This was giving him the creeps. Now that he thought about it, there had been something that stewed Sam and Tomioka had put away at the party. The restaurant had apologized, claiming they'd been added by mistake. Maybe they'd done a number on his colleague. Hey, a voice called from behind him. Am I late? Nah, Rengoku. Perfect timing. Yuzui turned in the direction of the voice, but stopped short at the sight of the absurdly huge hiking backpack Rengoku wore on his back. You do understand where we're going, right? What's with the kid? Senjuro was worried about me, Rengoku said. He made me bring all the salt in the house to ward off evil spirits. That whole thing's filled with salt? How much salt do you have in your house, anyway? Oh, unrefined salt, table salt, rock salt, the usual, Rengoku said, opening the pack to show him. Oh, and salted crackers. What are you going to do with crackers? Have a snack with the ghosts? Yuzui groaned. And that chunk of rock salt is the size of a baby. It really is. Where did you find something like that? Tomioka peered into the pack, grinning. Still, it's awfully nice of Senjuro to think of his big brother. I just have an older sister, but I always thought it'd be fun to have little siblings. His cheery voice made Yuzui shudder again. He put a hand on Rengoku's shoulder. Rengoku? Tomioka's being weird. Rengoku looked baffled. How so? Still on that? Tomioka made a show of being put out, goofing around like an ornery kid. Tomioka's the same as ever. You tell him, Rengoku, buddy. Yuzui's jaw dropped. He's talking about himself in the third person now? He gestured helplessly at Rengoku. But his colleague showed no sign of understanding. Weird how? How? Just, huh? Yuzui was at a loss for words. His friends looked mildly confused. You said Tomioka was being weird, right? Rengoku said. What did he do? A baffled grunt escaped through Yuzui's gritted teeth. This couldn't seem normal to Rengoku, could it? The surly gym teacher suddenly turning cheerful and charming? How is he weird? How is he not weird? Everything about this is uncanny. Yuzui wished Shinazugawa could have made it. Rengoku wasn't the sharpest crayon in the box, but Shinazugawa would have understood the problem. Or would he have? Maybe Yuzui was the one who didn't get it. Do I really know what Tomioka is like? Yuzui started to doubt himself. Could he be sure he was seeing Tomioka as he really was? Who was Tomioka, anyway? Tomioka. Tomioka. Tomioka, ka. Tomioka's name and face repeated in his mind until he felt ready to snap. Why did he even care? Why was he wasting so much mental energy thinking about Tomioka? It's all in my head. Just my imagination. In the nick of time, before Yuzui could make a complete fool of himself, Kanae arrived. Together, the teachers slipped through the school gates and into the shadows of the building, so unfamiliar at night. The night watch began. Man, it's dark, said Yuzui, leading the way with his phone flashlight. It feels kind of wrong, said Rengoku, following with an actual flashlight. Exciting, like a childhood dare. Watch your step, Miss Kanae. Thank you, Mr. Tomioka. Kanae and Tomioka followed Yuzui and Rengoku down the dark hallway. First we'll check out that pot in the biology lab, said Yuzui. No one seemed to know in which hallway the old man was supposed to appear. They decided they might as well start with the spirit whose location had been pinpointed. Rengoku nodded. An old man jumps out of the pot and crawls around the lab, right? Yuzui rolled his eyes. You're mixing the two stories up. Actually, Rengoku's version was even creepier. As they walked, Yuzui tried to untangle the stories he and the other teachers had collected from students. The spirit in the biology lab, Black Circle, had 3 mouths, 1 eye, and a large but unknown number of hands. Subjected anyone it saw to endless taunting and insults. Black Circle tickled, with all its hands, anyone who refused to listen to its incomprehensible boasting. Black Circle was definitely single. This tidbit came from an oddball student with a passion for automata. Black Circle was very proud of its pot. If anyone pointed out flaws in its workmanship, it became enraged and exploded into curses. Black Circle fancied itself an artist and laughed smugly. And the ghost in the hallway. Black Circle crawled around the school weeping. Black Circle muttered resentfully. Appeared at first glance to be an old man in a kimono, but, on closer inspection, had 2 horns on its head and did not appear entirely human. Black Circle attacked smaller students and stole their belongings. Black Circle had a prominent bump on its head from an axe kick Takedo gave it when it tried to attack him in junior high. Yuzui sighed. When I say it out loud, it sounds like a whole lot of nothing. The teasing, the tickling, the stealing, all perfectly ordinary human behavior. Except for the spirit's supposedly eerie appearances, both stories were basically descriptions of common school aggravations. On top of that, apparently the crawling guy could be beaten up by a junior high kid. As he continued down the hall, Yuzui began to feel deflated, not that he ever been enthusiastic about this expedition. In contrast, this has to end. Rengoku burned with righteous indignation. How dare these manifestations harass our students? Sure, of course, but I won't let anything hurt them. I don't care what it is. Kyojuro Rengoku will dish out justice. As if in response to this declaration, a grating sound drifted from the darkness ahead of them. CSSHSHSH. CSSHSHSH. Something was crawling down the hallway. Why? A hoarse voice sighed. Why must they persecute me? I never wronged them. Why? On and on the voice droned. It's not my fault. I didn't do anything. They're the ones in the wrong. Why does everyone pick on me? Ah. Hateful, so hateful. The world is full of bullies who torment the weak. Yuzui stopped and turned his phone toward the voice. The sulky muttering gave way to a shriek. In the pool of light, an old man with cracked skin shuddered dramatically. Clad in an ancient kimono, he seemed human at first glance, but 2 horns protruded from his head. On his forehead, between the horns, was a large bump, as if from a kick. Yuzui was gobsmacked. The thing was real. Yuzui had assumed the ghost stories were nonsense made up by students trying to scare each other. But here he was, staring down at one of the ghosts. He had no idea what to do. If it had been a human intruder, he wouldn't have hesitated to slug it. But he wasn't sure a fist would settle things with a monster. Rengoku, he shouted. You're salt. Throw salt on it. Huh? Throw it where? Rengoku wandered past the monster without so much as a pause. Yuzui's eyes almost popped out of his head. Was Rengoku so scared he was pretending not to see the creature? No, he was the last person who would do that. They'd known each other since their school days, and Yuzui had never seen Rengoku shrink from anything. Besides, he'd just been ranting about doing whatever it took to protect his students. Why would he ignore the monster crawling down the hallway? What kind of strategy was that? Shaking off his bafflement, Yuzui remembered that Kanea was still behind him. Surely she was terrified by this hair-raising apparition. Kanea, are you all right? He turned. If you're scared, you can close your eyes and hang on to me. The beautiful biology teacher passed him coolly to face the old man. In a clear voice, she chanted, Rin. Pyo. Tu. Sha. Tai. She pulled paper charms from her jacket and tossed them at the apparition. The moment the first charm touched the lump on his head, the old man's body was engulfed in flames. He screamed in pain and rage. Before Yuzui's eyes, the creature's flesh burned away. Even the ashes left behind faded into nothingness. Silence fell in the hallway. While Yuzui tried to comprehend what he'd just seen, Kanea smiled sweetly at him. We're all right now. Yeep. It wasn't Yuzui who let out the squeak of a cry, but Tomioka. He backed away from Kanea, trembling. Kanea strode off. We'd better keep going. Yuzui couldn't stop himself from calling out to her. What was that just now? What do you mean? She looked back at him with the smile of an angel, but her voice and bearing warned him not to press her. Yuzui swallowed the rest of his questions. In his experience, a woman would open up in her own time. What's taking you guys so long? Let's get to the biology lab. Rengoku had finally noticed that the others were far behind him. He waved from the far end of the hallway, still acting like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Still puzzled, Yuzui followed his colleague to the biology lab. Tomioka trotted along behind Yuzui. He kept glancing nervously around, maintaining a fixed distance from Kanea. He was practically clutching Yuzui's arm. Yuzui didn't blame him for being shaken, but it seemed like too much. Since when was Tomioka such a coward? Yuzui shut down that line of thinking. Any preconceptions about what Tomioka was like had gone out the window at the beginning of the evening. He felt a strange chill. His body was suddenly so heavy he could hardly keep walking. We'll finish this up and grab some ramen or something, he told himself, trying to pick up the pace. When they reached the biology lab, Yuzui looked back at Kanea. Have you seen the pot the ghost is supposed to come from? No, nothing like it. Yuzui was struck by the strange wistfulness in her voice. It seemed odd that, as the new biology teacher, she hadn't familiarized herself with everything in the lab. Maybe the pot only appeared at certain times. Does it move? He asked, more to himself than to anyone around him. The pot, I mean. Is that possible? It's pitch black in here, said Kanea. Everyone please watch your step. Tomioka let out another squeak. With the blackout curtains closed, the room was indeed dark, much darker than the hallway. Even so, they had no trouble finding the haunted pot. A monstrous, misshapen specter hovered over it like a genie from a lamp. Even Yuzui, who taught modern art, had never seen anything so surreal. Well, burbled the creature. If it isn't some idiot. Teachers. What business do you have with Gyako, king of pots? Yo. Perhaps this self-proclaimed king was bored, because the spirit seemed almost pleased to see the teachers. It looked them up and down as if assessing their worth. Nothing but a gaggle of monkeys. No aesthetic sense whatsoever. But I suppose I can work with that. Yuzui scowled. It's even mouthier and grosser than the rumors said. What? Said Rengoku. Do you see the pot monster? Where? What do you mean? Yuzui said. It's right in front of us. Where? A huge chunk of rock salt in hand, Rengoku stared in. Exactly the opposite direction. The curtains? Is it hiding behind the blackout curtains? I'm telling you, it's right in front of us. What's up with you tonight? Kanea leaned over to whisper in his ear. Yuzui. Rengoku can't see the spirit. Yuzui turned to look at her. But it's plain as day. Some people are like that. Either they're too filled with strong positive energy to be affected by evil auras, or they're her. She grimaced apologetically. A bit thick. Positive, energetic, and not too bright. It was like the description was tailor-made for their colleague. Yuzui recalled Rengoku's earlier incomprehensible behavior, and the crease on his brow smoothed away. So he couldn't see the old man either? I don't think so. Or hear him. As they talked, Rengoku was still whirling around, earnestly looking for the creature that threatened his students. Quit hiding and show yourself. Come out and fight with your head held high. There's a real musclehead, eh? Poor dimwit can't even appreciate my beautiful visage. How dense is this fellow? Gyako laughed gratingly. To the right of the blackboard, Rengoku, Yuzui snapped. By the water tank. Got it. With a confident nod, Rengoku raised the chunk of rock salt over his head. The rock salt slammed into the blackboard with a crash. A cry of "Hyo" escaped from the specter's three mouths in unison. Well, Yuzui? Did I get it? Unfortunately, the massive hunk of salt had missed Gyako by mere centimeters. But the creature paled and fled back into its pot. As if waiting for this, Kanae slapped a paper charm over the mouth of the pot. That was perfect, she said, clapping her hands prettily. Thanks to you, Mr. Rengoku, the students will no longer be subjected to condescension, showered in verbal abuse, or tickled. Really? Great. Rengoku laughed. Yuzui stared at Rengoku with new eyes. The guy had defeated a monster with pure physical force, and he didn't even know it. What's wrong, Yuzui? Nothing. He forced his gaze away from Rengoku to meet the eyes of Tomioka, whose face was as white as paper. Yuzui swallowed in surprise at his colleague's obvious terror. You okay, Tomioka? I am fine, Yuzui. Rengoku's just really something, is all. Who knew? Tomioka forced a laugh, but his eyes weren't smiling. Sweat poured down his face. Next we get the monster crawling around the hallway. Rengoku dashed from the classroom, ready to strike while the iron was hot. He didn't know that Kanae had already exorcised the old man. Yuzui was about to follow him and explain when he heard Rengoku shout, "Found it." Upstairs. Kanae already got that one. Yuzui peered into the hallway just in time to see Rengoku leaping up the staircase 6 steps at a time. Rengoku. Kanae already took care of that guy. Yuzui looked over his shoulder at Kanae, seeking her agreement. There was a troubled look on her face. I did hear something upstairs, she said. TMP, TMP. Yuzui heard it too. The sound of heavy footsteps. It might be a burglar, said Kanae. Yuzui shook his head. Would a burglar be stupid enough to stomp around like that? Anyway, this was a school. There was almost nothing of monetary value. Which wasn't to say it was impossible. Just the other day, he'd heard about a high school that upgraded its computers to the latest model and immediately had them stolen, plugs ripped out of the wall. Still not sure what was going on, Yuzui followed Rengoku up the stairs. At the top, he stopped in surprise. You guys? What are you doing here? Tanjiro Kamado, Zenitsu Agatsuma, and Inosuke Hashira stared back. All three were members of the band Yuzui led, CE style. Democracy. You're telling us you're not here out of idle curiosity? You came to bust the ghosts yourselves? That's right, said Tanjiro. Normally one of the most responsible senior students, the boys looked crestfallen. I had to do something. My little sister's friends are all scared. The other boys jumped in to explain that they eagerly offered to lend their friend a hand. I'm not scared of ghosts. I'll kick their butts, Inosuke thrust his chest out and snorted. I'm the boss, after all. Can't let my minions go into danger alone. It seemed they both meant well, at least. Rengoku turned to the last member of the group, whose face stiffened. My only desire is to keep the peace of the academy, he said. Yeah. Yuzui waved a dismissive hand. Why'd you really do it? What do you think? Zenitsu's eyes burned with excitement. If I get a rep as a monster hunter, all the girls will be hot for me. Next year, I'll be swimming in Valentine's chocolate. The words rattled out all at once, as if he couldn't stop himself. With a gasp, he shut his mouth like a trap. Yuzui snorted a laugh. I figured you, at least, had less than pure intentions. That was total entrapment. Zenitsu cried. A forced illegal confession. How dare you? You told on yourself, dummy. Yuzui turned away in annoyance. Well, what should we do with them? Rengoku looked at the three boys thoughtfully. Tanjiro was shrinking into himself with embarrassment, Inosuke was throwing his head back proudly, and Zenitsu was cradling his blonde head, startling even in the dark, moaning. No. Even setting aside the, less admirable motives, it's good that you're thinking about your school and fellow students. Rengoku put on his sternest face. But we still can't allow you to sneak in here at night on your own. We're not on our own, Inosuke argued, digging around in his ear. Oh! Yuzui glared at Inosuke. Tanjiro stepped forward to support his friend. He's right. We wouldn't break into the school without permission. We asked Mr. Tomioka and he offered to come with us. He's in the restroom right now. Yuzui barked out a laugh. Zenitsu was a bit of a sneak, but he was surprised that Inosuke and Tanjiro would lie to him. They didn't have the guts for it. Whoa, there. Don't make up stories. Mr. Tomioka has been with us all night. He looked back, but no one was there. Tomioka? Was he still downstairs? He must really be scared. Yuzui was about to check the stairwell when he heard a surly voice. You called? Gu Tomioka stepped out of the nearby men's room. Yuzui frowned. You really were in the can? Yeah. What of it? Wait, whoa, hold up. Yuzui waved his hands in front of him. How'd you get up here ahead of us? You've been with us the whole time. Like hell I have. No, we met in front of the school gates at 11:30. Remember? Yuzui looked to Rengoku for help. Frowning in confusion, Rengoku said, What are you talking about, Yuzui? Tomioka said he had other plans tonight. Huh? Yuzui's jaw dropped. You didn't say you were coming here with some students instead. You should have just told us, Tomioka. Why the cold shoulder? Tomioka grunted. I wasn't paying attention to your jabber. That stewed salmon really hit the spot. The flat effect. The few words. The eyes that hid what he was thinking. That mask-like face. No doubt about it, this was Gu Tomioka. So who had he been patrolling with? Man, you've been out of it today, Yuzui, Rengoku was saying. Talking to yourself, complaining about Tomioka when he wasn't even there. Talking to myself? He wasn't there? You're looking pale. Do you have a cold or something? Don't you? Think he looks sick, Tomioka? Yeah, I guess, said Tomioka. Now that I'm thinking about it. The whole time they'd been patrolling, Rengoku had never spoken to Tomioka. He hadn't even called his name. According to Kanea, Rengoku couldn't see or hear supernatural entities. But that means... Sorry, Yuzui, Kanea said. I thought it was a harmless copycat spirit, so I decided to let it be for a little while. But it turned out to be an evil spirit that targets men with girlfriends. It copies the face of someone close to its victim, then drains his life force. Her face blossomed into a smile. But I just exorcised it, so no worries. Yuzui caught a glimpse of his own face reflected in a window. His skin was ashen, his cheeks were hollow, and his eyes stared out from black pits. Suddenly dizzy, he passed out. Tenjin Yuzui slept for 2 full days. He recovered with the devoted care of his 3 girlfriends, but the students and staff whispered that the devil had taken him. Rengoku and Tomioka worried about his strange behavior during the ghost hunt, and Kanea quietly handed him a paper charm against evil. Zenitsu, the only one of the Midnight Invaders to be punished, was made to write an essay on good intentions. A month later, determined to get his Valentine's chocolates, he dragged Tanjiro along on another secret mission. But that's a story for another time. To this day, a chunk of rock salt is embedded in the blackboard in the biology lab. A new rumor has started that it's a talisman of positive energy. At any rate, Kimetsu Academy is once more at peace, in its own way. End of Demon Slayer. Signs from the Wind. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.